Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and we bring in different leaders from various fields of expertise and we get their hot takes on things that are happening past, present, and future. Today, we have Marcus Chan, who is a renowned sales expert, written a few books. One's been on the Wall Street Journal's top bestsellers list. Thank you so much for joining us, Marcus.
Hey, Chris, my absolute pleasure. Pumped to be here.
Of course, man. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now, who you're working with.
Yeah, super simple. So I work directly with the sales teams and reps, help them max their comp plan out, crush their numbers, and have fun doing it, regardless of the economy or the market.
Very cool. I think there's a lot for us to unpack or unravel in that, especially in today's market. But before we do that and get into your area of expertise, tell us a little bit about how did you get into the world of sales? I feel as we just talked about before this, everybody that ends up in sales and marketing, from my experience, very rarely, maybe there's been one guest that's ever said that they picked up sales from their family and it was something that was ingrained in them at a very young age. But outside of that, it's all kind of random. So how did you end up getting in it?
I'm going to fall into the mass majority of your the people that have been on the podcast because no different from me, man. I definitely didn't think I was a born salesperson. Never thought I'd actually be in sales. My parents had a small Chinese restaurant in Eugene, Oregon. So I grew up working in a restaurant. So I thought maybe that'd be my life even as I was growing up. I went to school, got decent grades, nothing really crazy. Didn't know what I want to do when I graduated. Worked a lot of odd jobs all throughout college. So again, I wasn't like, oh man, I'm so good at sales. I want to go. It just wasn't a thing. And the only reason I got into sales was more so because I did an internship in college and I did really, really well. And it was on their like B2C side.
Hmm.
And they had a new B2B division opening up in Oregon. And they were like, hey, you'd be a really great fit to help us build the startup, if you will. And when they say build, I thought it would be cool. Like build something from scratch, have a lot of fun, learn the business. They meant build on, we don't have any customers. We need you to go out and get customers.
Got it.
So
Got it.
that was like my first head dive into sales. And I was pretty terrible. I almost got fired after my first couple months in sales, but fortunately, eventually figured it out and stayed in sales for another 13 years in
Very cool.
B2B sales. Did pretty well. And then I started my own business after that, which you get to the point I think a lot of people do, especially if they break into sales. They do really well. You realized you get taxed a lot and you have to find a better way to reduce your taxable burden and to
Yeah,
maximize your capital, if you will.
absolutely. Even if that means taking less gross and then be able to net more, right? Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Before we get into your entrepreneurial endeavor of like working on your own now, because I think there's a lot of different hats that comes on with different sales leaders. I think it's a natural progression. I think some really welcome that experience and realize that it's going to be wearing a lot of different hats and tackling a lot of things that they may or may not expect and areas of discomfort. But before I talk about that, talk us through that journey of I think there's definitely a point from a junior salesperson into becoming
Yeah.
sales executive and then sales leader. And I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that is more of a personal journey. It's not really about the skill sets and the things that you're picking up on the job, but it's how that affects your personal growth. Because when I see a lot of sales leaders, it comes down to their ability to connect with people at the end of the day. And that seems to be like the key differentiator between those I see really crush it on their own versus those that just continue working within an organization. Walk us through what that looks like for you. Is
Yeah.
there any of that I'm saying like rings true to you, or was it a different experience?
I think a lot of it rings true. Like I remember my first kind of taste into it was in that player coach type role
Mm.
where they say, hey, Marcus, you've been here for 6 months now. Yes, you were terrible at first for a while, but now you figured it out. You're doing well. You're the number one rep now consistently. We want you to go and take over a small team, teach them what you're doing. We're not going to give you a better title. We're not going to pay you any more money, but show us what you can do. And if you perform and you get them to perform, we'll talk about maybe promoting you. So, and I remember thinking to myself, like, this is a good opportunity. And I remember going into it and I realized very quickly the skills that actually I've developed in that short time that made me good at sales or decent at sales weren't the same one that made me a great leader. Just like
Mhm.
wildly different. Because generally speaking, if you're actually really selfish as a salesperson, that can actually serve you quite a bit because you'll do the hard things. As a leader, it completely goes against you, right? You have to be selfless. It was definitely like a realization, like, I'm not good at leadership yet. And I actually almost said, hey, I don't want this project anymore. Can I go back to just carry by my own number, carry my own bag, and not worry about anybody else? Now, fortunately, I eventually figured it out. What I realized was at the end of the day, like, for me personally, I had to think hard about this. I'm like, what do I really enjoy? Do I enjoy closing deals or do I enjoy helping other people close deals? And when I really sat down and thought about it, I love closing deals, but I love far more helping someone else close deals. And even in the next several years, I was still basically a player coach role, better titles. I had to carry my own bag still. And like they had to carry a bag as a whole thing. But I realized the best part about being a leader was I could bring somebody in, give them the skills, the training, the habits, the resources, and completely transform their lives. To take them from not making any money to making a lot of money and changing their lives was really cool and what they could do without money. So there's definitely a transgression over time of that level of development. And I'll say my difference in opinion to what you just mentioned from skills is I believe to be a really truly elite leader, what happens is you start stacking skills on top of each other over time. You learn how to better communicate, how to be far more organized, how to be visionary, how to actually run a full P&L, how to actually bring someone who's underperforming and turn them around, how to hire, how to train, how to coach for high performance, how to fire someone without making them be like a bad thing. You learn all these skills as being a leader over time, which ultimately stack to each other, which made it, I think, easier for me to jump into entrepreneurship because there were so many transferable skills when you're actually running a full P&L and running a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that maybe carrying over into the belief system that the initial motivation is to keep more of the money that you're earning. But in addition to that, there's the autonomy involved in it as well, doing your own thing. And as you mentioned, a few of those things that you're evolving in as a leader and within an organization, but also just involving in yourself. At what point do you feel like you have the belief that you are ready to go out and do this on your own? And in doing so, what were some of the expectations that you had going into it that may or may not have been realized? And this is a great question too, but I think what is the role that you've taken on that you have a strong emotional disposition towards along the way that you never knew that you would have picked up? It could be love
Yeah.
or hated. There's
Yeah.
usually something.
So I think the first piece was like even before I decided to make that leap, I got really clear on what really drives me. So I think a lot of people aren't really clear on what really motivates them, what really drives them. And actually, I think I didn't realize this until probably about a decade into my career. I didn't know either. It was probably mostly fear. I just grew up really poor and broke, seeing my immigrant parents work hard, and I didn't want to work in a restaurant. I'm like, I don't want that life. So that kind of that almost that fear drove me to work really hard and have results over time, but it's not really healthy, generally speaking. And I realized as part of it, in this like self-reflection journey, I'm like, really drives me is actually making an impact, actually helping people be really successful and really crush it in sales or just in life. And I had an 85 person sales organization at the time, and we are doing a couple hundred million a year in sales. And I was like, this is cool. I have a lot of influence. That's really great. It's a big company. Not only is it with just my organization, but also people within the whole company. They all knew who I was. It's a Fortune 500 company. Like I'm still in their training videos to this day. Still, this is years later. But I'm like I have a lot of influence in a cool way. But how do I impact more people? Like how do I impact millions of people? How can I go beyond this company and go external? And at the time, I still was too scared to just go and do my own thing. I'm like, it's really hard. Like when you're making great money, you have great influence. It's hard to lead something good for something great. It's really scary. And I didn't like courage to do that. So at that same time, for the last several years before that, I was learning about side hustles. This is before everyone in the mother had a side hustle. This is like 2016 where I decided to start building one. But like at the time, it was still a pretty new thing.
Mhm.
So I learned how to write an ebook, which again, at the time was very hard to do. Now everyone does it. But at the time, there was no real tools. I learned how to build a funnel. I learned how to automate it and get people to pay for something online and give me money without me being there. So this is all new to me because I'd never done before. And I remember before I built this little product, I said, Marcus, you should write a book. And this is before I wrote any books. And I said, that's crazy. I don't want to write a book. What I write about. They're like, you got promoted a lot of times. Like you've been promoted 12 times in your first 8 years in your career. That's crazy. And these are multi-billion dollar companies. How did you cut through the noise and actually make that happen? Because not just you got results, you did it at such a crazy clip. And I'm like, I think I just worked hard. No, it's not just it. Like you should write a book on this. I'm like, okay. So that's when I learned how to write an ebook, how to automate that. And I remember making it and then I put it out there. And I remember the first payment came through for $9.95. And like my world exploded because I was so used to like I'm having a sales conversation with someone, they're signing an agreement or they're signing an e-agreement, or I'm in a restaurant, I'm transacting for money. Like in person, like I wasn't used to like some stranger just gave me money. That's really weird. And then this took me on a whole other journey of learning how to build other digital products. So then I'm like, okay, let me see, maybe I can build an online course. Again, this is before everyone and their mother had an online course. Back then, only the internet marketers knew how to do this. So I bought a program, I learned how to do it. It took me 2 years. I built it out and I launched it overnight. And I was like, I want to even buy this. And it was like my very first sales course. It was $9.97. And I woke up because I launched at like 10 p.m. now, which is a terrible time to launch anything. But I'm like, oh, let's just see what happens. And I woke up and about $2,000 of new cash came in. I'm like, oh my goodness, like someone actually paid me. This is crazy. So that was a little bit of validation. Okay, maybe I can make this into something. But again, I was still like kind of gun shy. But what was interesting was over the next several weeks, more purchases came through. And I started getting these emails of people saying, hey, I did this, I got X result. I'm like, whoa, I did this, I got this Y result. I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. I'm getting amazing feedback. Now they're asking for one-on-one coaching. So it's just a natural upsell. I'm like, this is a good opportunity potentially to really leverage this, right? Because at this point, I saw my future. I can either keep doing this thing, the corporate career stuff, which is fine, it's great. But this could be my real way to actually impact way more people. So at that point, I had time it out with a few different things like stock vesting and President's Club trip. And about 8, 9 months later, I went all in and I dove all in. Super scary, but made that leap, drew the line in the sand, right? What was the third question you asked me? I forgot.
What's a skill that you picked up along the way as an entrepreneur that you either loved or hated?
Hate's a strong word. I strongly dislike, right? Because it's not my zone of genius, if you will. So starting off, I had a big staff. I had people doing stuff for me to managing myself. Nobody helped me with anything. Okay. Like, and I'm like, oh God, how do I get my tech stack together, trying to like connect it with like a Zapier and glue things together so it would work properly. Yes, I figured out I know how to do it now. It takes me way longer, right? Because it's just not my thing. So for the first year and a half, literally, 2 years, been in business for almost 5 years now. I was literally just do all my own tech stuff. A Zap connection would break. I'm in the back trying to connect it back together, trying to figure out what went wrong, why there's Zap errors, why is stuff not working properly, why wasn't this properly automatically delivered. I actually try to glue it all together myself. And I'll do it, but I don't like doing it because it's just probably takes someone like that's actually specialized in that, maybe like 20 minutes. It might take me an hour to diagnose a problem. Okay. And another 2 hours trying to fix the problem. Hopefully it gets fixed. It may not be the root problem I'm fixing. And then it'll break like 2 days later. Unfortunately, now I got a full-time tech guy now to solve it for me. But that was something for sure. I was like, I need to hire for this ASAP.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into that 5 years ago, what has been some of the things that maybe expectations wise, and maybe you had some, maybe you didn't have any, that you think were realized, and then some that have not been realized, that maybe it was like you thought it was going to go this way, but it zagged instead of zigged.
So what was really interesting was I remember on September 2019, that was like my official last day working corporate. I was whiteboard here and I mapped out my 3-year plan. I'm like, here's the product suite. How many sales of this product, this product? At the time, my goal was actually to create an online course business where I'm like, it'll be that internet money. I don't need to have any employees. Automatically, people are going to buy these online courses, and then the money's just going to roll in, and it's going to be amazing. And then maybe like I'll build in some consulting and maybe some coaching, and I'll have some of those types of additional stream. But the primary core business, like 90%, is going to be online courses. That was like my dream. I was thinking. And then what was really interesting was I remember like working towards that. So the first piece was what I would do is like to generate sales is I would go and I would do an every other week live webinar. So I'll spend like 2 weeks promoting people to show up to a live webinar. I teach something awesome in the live webinar. I make a pitch at the end, collect 5, 10, 20, 30K at the end of each webinar. And I'm like, all right, I think this machine's kind of working. Nice little cash injection every other week. Now, after 3 months of doing this, I was getting burnt out because it was like I felt like I was running these 2-week sprints. It's oh my God, like, promo, get them to show up. Okay, promo. It was like really exhausting. This was November, no, probably December timeframe. And I'm like, I just didn't know a better way, first off. And then I bought some program to improve my copywriting. So I'm like, oh, this guy's is copywriting. And I'm like, this guy he killed it. He was like a live session for 4 hours. I'm like, this is really well done. He offers other program that he called sold out courses. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is the program how to automate everything. Like automate a webinar, people just sign up, they're gonna buy the course, it's gonna be absolutely awesome. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna hop on a call with the salesperson there, and I hop on a call. He doesn't really go through a pitch, but he drops the price point at the time, which is 5K. And I thought it was just for a course. I didn't realize there's a bunch of other stuff that came with it. And I'm like, 5K for just a course? No, I'm not gonna do that. But he's like, no, there's coaching calls, there's this, that will provide support. At the point, I'm like, I was already turning it off. I'm like, I don't want to do it. Let me just keep doing what I'm doing, right? Then for a few more months, getting way more burnt out. I'm like, oh my God, now I'm in a better headspace. Let me just get back on the call with the same guy again, really see what the offer is about, and all the stuff I want to do it. So I get on the call, and the price has gone up double. It's 10K now. So a few months later, I'm like, oh my God, I should have taken action earlier. I'm like, screw it. Put it on the Amex. I join it. And as I go through it, he goes through a better model of building an actual like fully comprehensive program. We used to do this thing where it's just a course, but like the results aren't as good, which is true. Completion rates are lower. That's just what happens. Versus if they pay more, it's a high ticket coaching program, you have coaching, etc., and you have a course and a community, they're gonna have a higher completion rate, better results, better everything. So I'm like, okay. So took the next several months and I basically restructured everything. And now became like the core offer as a high ticket coaching program that completely pivoted that part of the business and did really well. We scaled it up, kept doing that. We did it for about 4 years for the business. And what was interesting was one of the things that I kept turning away was actually B2B clients.
Hmm.
So part of the marketing strategy, we're pretty active on LinkedIn. So like we get these inbound leads from companies, probably like one a month, right? Nothing crazy. This is early on. And I just turned them down. I would say, no, I don't want to train your team. I don't want to do just workshops. I don't want to sell them just a course. Like I want them to actually get results. So like the issue a lot of time with corporate workshops is like most reps don't want to be there anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay. And I didn't want to be there anyways. So I don't want to be there. They don't want to be there. Yeah, the money's good. Didn't really want to do that. So in my 4th year, this is again another pivot I didn't expect, which was I said, okay, let me just take some of these calls. Let me just see what the market's about. Get on these calls. And I don't want to do the workshop thing. I was a leader. I ran big teams. I know these workshops don't work. They don't have active recall. They don't have retention. Once that session's over, give it 1 week, they're back to old habits.
Mm-hmm.
They're not comprehensive enough. So I'm like, let me just basically put them, like, because with our individual program for reps, the reps crush it. Like I know average rep comes in 13.44 days to get results. I know that because we track the data. So I'm like, if we can do a modified program very similar to that for the teams, maybe they'll do it. And it costs a lot more. So I show them the offer. Hey, this is how much it is per person. Here's 7 reps. It's 50K. And they're like, done. It's a 3-month program. They got insane results. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. I wasn't sure they didn't pay for it, but they got crazy results. And then another inbound lead, close them too. Same thing. I'm like, okay, so the market's willing to pay for that, right? They're willing to pay for a more comprehensive program. That was another pivot now. So last year, now we start taking on these B2B clients only if it's a good fit. So we can adjust for them. Obviously, if it's a team that have 100 reps, it's very different because they're not going to be able to justify the same level of price point per rep. But that's been an interesting pivot as well. But it's one of those things where, you know, as an entrepreneur, it's you gotta like listen to the market, you gotta constantly iterate, you gotta be open to things. And I was probably too headstrong for the first 4 years, and probably cost myself quite a bit of money by not making those pivots earlier. So
Yeah, makes sense. Interesting. And so where's things now with you? Yeah, I want to talk about a little bit in terms of how the sales market has evolved, but is on the topic of your business. Do you foresee you pivoting it, or maybe it's not even pivoting is the right word now, but maybe like expanding and going more upstream in terms of working with larger companies and larger sales teams? Or are you more open-minded to it now and realizing there's a potential there? It's just like how you figure out to deliver that value to that group.
yeah, 100%. So we figured out smaller teams. Because my end goal has always been whatever product I deliver, I want it to be a really good product that gets results. Like I know if I want to sell a 100-person team, a few workshops, yeah, they'll buy. But will they actually get results? Unknown, especially with the kind of model workshops. I know the smaller teams, because of the way it's designed, it's okay because of how much we pack into the access and the support, they'll get results. It's the bigger teams that's unknown. So what I'm actually doing right now is I'm actually building on a software somebody else right now, another company, to
Mm.
build out a workshop type software that's far more scalable, that's education based. I don't know if you ever heard of the app Duolingo. You've heard of the app Duolingo?
Yeah.
Really cool language app, right, for learning. It's like gamify, gets you engaged, gets you hooked in. So it's basically it's like an advanced version of that for like workshops. So they're set workshops. So we're actually building out a test module right now with this company. I see it being a really awesome way that's going to help get results because of the way it's designed, but also very scalable.
Hmm.
It's also key. So this way, because you can put in 200 reps into it, and because it's the way a software works, it divides them up into these automated workshops, and they go through the exercises. I can see actually getting long-term result. And then if we built built-in support on the back end, I think it could be an absolute killer product. So we'll get results, and it'll be hopefully very affordable as well with sales teams. So that's my next hypothesis that I'm building out for that specific reason. That's all. I'm very excited about that. So we should have actually V1 coming out actually probably next week for me to test out.
That's super exciting. That's something I would imagine that you're going through the motions now, but probably 3, 4 years ago, wasn't even thinking about that in the game plan.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. That wasn't even the thing. But I think it's why it's always key to you got to read the market, you got to adapt, you got to adjust. And at the end of the day, like we may believe the best product in the world, but the market determines if it's a good product or not.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely. Very cool. As we're winding up on time here, wanted to get your 2 cents as to maybe related back to who you are directly working with and even maybe like with the types of inquiries that you're getting now for your services. How have you seen other like sales teams or like larger organizational sales teams adjust in terms of what they're prioritizing? What are the things that they're seeing in the market that is instigating them to reach out to you
no.
today that may has been a different ask than a few years ago? Let's just start there real quick, and then I'm
Yeah.
curious as to like what you're thinking about in the future.
So I'm gonna take a step back, and I think it's like the market shifts a lot of things, right? We work with a lot of software reps, a lot of software teams, but so I think back to, let's call it, even because there's the boom of COVID that actually probably drove sales for some people in a inorganic way. But even before that, we're in this bull market,
Mm.
which has many benefits, right? So cash is flush, certainty is high, easier to get money, etc. And ultimately, like for a lot of SaaS companies, product-led growth, which is we got a really good product. We got the shiniest cool tool, with the shiniest new software. And that by itself would actually sell. You can have a subpar salesperson
Mhm. Yep.
and people would buy.
Yeah.
Like that's just how it was. And what's interesting is, especially that breed of salesperson, if they only sold in tech in the last, say,
Yeah.
5, 10 years, they never actually sold through recessions.
Yeah.
They never had to learn how to create a need. On top of that, there are more softwares than ever before. So
Yeah.
competition has risen. It's harder to sell. There's less money now. It's different. So even the very first industry I sold into, this was in 2007, it was in the last recession, highly commoditized, tons of competition. Nobody knew who we were, no PMF, no nothing. So I was really fortunate and blessed to be taught how to take someone from completely cold, book a meeting, and get them to close and do it over and over. Because I was given the gift of having zero direction, zero help, and selling in a very tough market. So those things is what's happening a lot of people today,
Yep.
which is
Absolutely. 1000%. Yeah.
like this is they get on these calls, see these discovery calls, these demo calls, and they get on a call, they ask 1 or 2 questions, they're hoping the pitch is just going to sell them. They're hoping
Mhm.
the ROI numbers they made up is going to sell them. They're hoping the features of the demo is just going to sell them. And it's not working anymore. What a lot of teams are seeing, they're seeing lower close rate, lower conversion rates, longer sales cycles,
Yeah.
smaller deal sizes.
Yeah.
It said because a lot of them were inbound heavy, less pipeline than ever. So it's just leading to this huge problem. So what's happening in a lot of these teams is they first try to drive activity, which is all right. That means everyone's got to double down. You're making 10 calls a day. Now you got to do 20 calls. You're doing 20. Now I want you to do 40. You're sending 50 emails. I want you to send 100 emails. So they're just doubling down just purely on mass marketing, which Buyers are more skeptical than ever,
Yep.
even more skeptical, right? That's just the reality. They're so skeptical. Like they're, I myself know when I'm going to buy software, I do all my homework beforehand.
Yep.
I get on a call, I'm pretty much ready to go as long as you don't botch the call. If you want me on the call with you, you're probably down the line at that point. That's just the reality. So what happens is you also have less chances for error as a salesperson now. So these teams are reaching out and they're saying, hey, Marcus, we got low close rates. We're too much struggling. We're not doing enough pipeline, long sales cycle. The reps complain it's the market, it's the recession. Those all impact it, but they need those skills. So that's what we're focusing on with these teams to help them get better. And for some teams, I was just talking to a team and they've been around for about 20 years. They do about 20, 25 million a year. Small sales team of 8 people. Like they just put in Salesforce like last year. They don't have any tracking. They have no idea about conversions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm literally asking them like, hey, so take a look at your team over the last quarter. What was their close rate? They're like, I actually have no idea. Okay, let's go simpler. All right. How many proposals did they put out the last quarter? Oh, I'm not really sure. Okay, how many deals are closed? Oh, I know this number. I'm like, okay. It's a pretty prevalent problem, but because they're seeing decreased sales, they realize there's a problem with the team. We got to train them up. We need to give them the skills to actually be successful. So that's a pretty common theme now as a result. Or if they're not willing to train the team up, it's activity driven, or they're just trying to, I hear about it from their reps. They'll get sent like LinkedIn posts or YouTube videos to hopefully that'll just solve their problem. But most of them actually need more contextual stuff. So that's what we're seeing definitely for sure in the market.
Yeah. And I guess like the last question here is how do you feel the market is going to shift? I have my own personal thoughts. A lot of the things that you just mentioned are things I just was talking to my team about this morning, and it's been a recurring theme with a lot of these conversations. But yeah, I think those salespeople that have been through various cycles, including recessions, selling commoditized products, are the ones that are primed to do right now. And those that were hired, promoted, and saw their success within the past 5 to 10 years are probably struggling quite a bit.
Yeah.
With that said, I think obviously there's macroeconomic things involved in there too, but do you foresee in the next year or 2 years, what is your hot take is like to the sales landscape evolving? And that could be related to the election year, it could be related to AI, it could be related to a ton of different variables. But what are you thinking here? What's your kind of like hot take and maybe a hypothesis that you have that the sales market is going to be evolving into?
Yeah. I'm thinking 5, 10 years. I think about this. So we're going to go through for sure. We'll have impacts of the election cycle.
Yep.
That's always, it's typically normal. I think we'll see a lot of sales teams downsizing.
Mhm.
So I think they're naturally going to downsize. So people will take on larger territories.
Mhm.
Just like always, the cream rises to the top.
Yep.
So there's always going to be top performers in every industry. They'll have better territories, et cetera. They'll keep performing. Bottom and average reps, unfortunately, fall through the same cycle that happens every single tough market, which is they go from job to job every 18 to 24 months.
Mhm.
Never really getting real results because they're not willing to look in the mirror. That's a really common theme.
Yep.
The very bottom 10% will probably just won't make it in sales.
Mhm.
They're just probably going to go into just other jobs, et cetera.
Yep.
I see that for sure. I also believe there'll be an evolution to go back to full cycle, just
Mhm.
full cycle reps.
Yep.
Like I was a full cycle rep my entire career. So that's why it's always surprising to me when AEs these days don't want to prospect. I'm like, so you're willing to bet your livelihood,
Yeah,
your
right.
mortgage on a brand new BDR, bless their heart, but they've never prospected before. You're willing to bet that on them. Or are you willing to fill your own pipeline and whatever they do is just gravy on top? Now it's a different way of thinking. I think we'll see that shift as well. I think we'll see a shift until the point. I think AI will probably replace SDRs and BDRs to begin with. That's my opinion. I think it's probably the easiest to probably potentially scale out to replace out. But in that interim, I just see they'll probably hopefully pay better for SDRs, get a better person, someone who's better, more effective, and they may cover multiple reps now. Some teams are already doing this already, right? So maybe one SDR to say 4 reps. Those reps are still full cycle, but now we're going to fill up pipeline, right? To the point where eventually AI will replace them. I do see a lot of the sales tech improving over time, where it's going to take probably a lot of the administrative stuff for salespeople, the account research, the prep, the coaching card, battle card prompts are going to show up on calls to help guide them. So I think that stuff for sure will make them even better.
Mhm.
But I could see it where it's maybe before you needed 10 reps, do call it 10 million. Now maybe you have 4 like super reps, if you will, and they're doing 10 million, right?
Mhm.
So they're doing 2.5 mil each. They're a far more productive rep. They might be backed by another SDR as well. So I just see that's what I predict is going to happen. And I think eventually, realistically, like depending on how fast it goes, it will get to the point where it will just be that AI salesperson. I think at the end of the day, people like when they get on a call, say like they call the bank and there's either the little automated machine, they get frustrated because it's not good enough.
Yeah.
But imagine if they just actually could understand what you're saying,
Yeah. Yeah.
solve
Yeah.
all your
Good
problems,
enough. Yeah.
and it's take care of your problems. You're not going to care if that was AI or not. You're just gonna be like, cool. That's all I wanted to know.
Yep.
Now I'm ready to buy. Now I'm ready. Thank you for solving my problem. That's all you really care about.
Yeah.
So I think it's eventually get to that point. Now that could
Yep.
be 25 years down the road.
Sure.
Could be 10 years. I don't know. Who knows? And I don't think it won't be an overnight thing. So obviously the companies with the resources, if they were to get to that point of the actual full AI person, a salesperson, they had the resources to actually do it.
Yeah.
Depending on the cost structure and how much capital it requires, smaller companies probably aren't going to be able to afford that. At least the first iteration is my assumption.
Interesting. Yeah. Very cool. On that note, I think it's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your insights and visibility in terms of like how your journey was like. Lots of great nuggets in there. And I think that's a great insight in terms of what you think the next 5, 10, 20 years is going to look like too. Thank
Cool.
you. Very
Thanks for
cool.
having me on. My pleasure.